Our next thread is titled, Pregnancy is Glorified. Hello, I'm B. I just wanted to come on here and see if anyone else felt this way because I am so tired of pretending that I am happy being pregnant. I absolutely hate it. This is my first pregnancy. I'm 11 weeks, 6 days today, and I'm hating every minute of it. My husband is in the military and he literally knocked me up, moved me to Japan in the span of 1 month and left this entire first trimester and still won't be back till July. This was posted in June, by the way. Little to no contact is how it's been. I honestly just feel like venting in case any other expecting mamas out there are on the same boat. I'm alone and in a different country and completely out of my element. I was diagnosed with hyperemesis gravidarum at 8 weeks, which led me to the ER alone for 4 days, and that was kind of traumatic for me. Hyperemesis gravidarum is essentially very extreme morning sickness. I suffer from severe anxiety and OCD, and one of my obsessive fears is hospitals. I.e. going in and never coming out, essentially. But this has been the hardest thing I've done in my entire life. I feel so unhappy, and being off my meds involuntarily because I couldn't keep anything down, including Zoloft and prenatals. It seems impossible to reach those 9 months. I want this baby, don't get me wrong, but this constant, relentless nausea and throwing up, annoying anxiety is just really tearing me apart. And don't even get me started on tearing and labor fears I've acquired. I just want to know I'm not crazy for being so angry and unhappy during a time that should be celebrated. When I try to talk to other women who've had babies about how awful this is, a weird, similar monologue comes out their mouth. It's so worth it. Everyone goes through it. It's not so bad. You'll be okay. And that makes me hate myself more because it makes me feel weak for admitting that I am far from okay and the most miserable I've been in my life. As I type this, I'm literally holding in my puke, and it infuriates me that I'm no longer fully in control of my body. I've grown cold and detached from my baby because I literally feel like I'm in survival mode. Am I a terrible person? Should I even be a mother? Now, this is obviously a very, very, very sad thread in general. I want to address a whole bunch of different things here. The first one is the claim pregnancy is glorified. I actually disagree very much with the claim that pregnancy is glorified. I think there are way more horror stories like this about pregnancies that get shared than positives. I was terrified of the idea of being pregnant for pretty much, I'd also say most of my early 20s, pretty much all of my early 20s. When I was very young, I would always have this thought, hey, I kind of like the idea of kids, but being pregnant, labor, birth, none of that sounds super appealing. That sounds like an extremely painful and exhausting time. And I think that I developed that attitude pretty much through osmosis from my environment and from the people around me, and the way that media portrays pregnancy, the way that media portrays labor, and so on. So I disagree very fundamentally with this claim. When I was pregnant and I was around colleagues and so on, everyone would always very much enjoy telling me asking what types of symptoms I was experiencing, asking if morning sickness was really bad, asking if I had if I had back pain, if I could still walk, if I could still sit, how comfortable I was, how uncomfortable I was, etc., etc., etc. So a lot of people really focus on the negatives of pregnancy, and that is kind of sucky for everyone out there who does not have a terrible pregnancy. And I was one of those people who had a pretty awesome pregnancy by and large. And so because I had a pretty awesome pregnancy, I cannot relate so much to this person on a personal level. What I think I would always try to emphasize when people have these types of experiences is how much of the experience, I would always question how much of this experience is due to the physicality, like the physical symptoms that you are going through, versus due to everything else around it. And I would always question, as a person who is suffering, who's going through a really painful experience, to what extent are there things that you can do that could influence it positively? For example, if getting pregnant, if you want to get pregnant, if you're actually actively trying to conceive, and would be a planned pregnancy, then for every mother out there, or for every prospective, for every hopeful mother out there, I would probably spend the first 6 months or a year before you start trying to get pregnant, really looking at nourishing yourself and your body and getting your physical health in the best possible shape that you could get it. And that involves doing things like eating very well, eating a lot of foods that are really high in vitamins. So things like liver, meat, oysters, fish, etc. Those types of things, like real diversity in your diet. And then looking at things like getting lots of sunlight, doing exercise, getting your sleep schedule in order, everything that you could possibly do that gets your body in the best possible physical shape that you can do it. Because a lot of sickness is down to the depletion or the level of depletion that your body is experiencing. And the more depleted you are, the more exhausted you'll be, the harder of a time you will have, and so on. Morning sickness is often a symptom in early pregnancy specifically because your body during that time is building up the placenta. And once the placenta is there, then the placenta takes on a lot of the energy that is required to sustain the baby. And that's why a lot of people will experience in their second trimester, a lot of people call it like kind of the honeymoon of pregnancy. The second trimester gets so much better than the first trimester, because the first trimester, the baby is being fed. You're feeding both the baby and the placenta, and both of those are happening directly from your system, from your blood, from your body, without any support. So that's one thing that could help. In this situation, for example, OP, it sounds a lot like isolation is a really big problem, and not having help or support is the biggest issue that you are experiencing. So this is part of getting pregnant, then moving, then being in a foreign country where you don't have a support system, where you don't have connections, where you don't have family, where no one can help you, and then your partner, your husband is also not present, so he also can't help you. And so what happens is that you end up experiencing this life of just feeling sick all the time and being able to dwell in that sickness and not getting any support from anyone. So when you do feel a bit hungry, you have to go feed yourself. If you do want to clean up, you have to clean up by yourself. And that makes it so much more difficult. And so in general, if you have a support system, and look for ways to try and get yourself a support system, whether online, but ideally in person, because that will make a much bigger difference to your life. That can make a huge difference in these periods of time when you're just not feeling well and you just need some help. That's one aspect of it. When she says, okay, can't do anything about the nausea and the throwing up, and that's really unfortunate, that's a medical part. I would hope that her doctors can help her out with that. But the gnawing anxiety and the fear of tearing and labor fears, like these are all pretty typical horror stories that people share when it comes to pregnancy, labor, birth, etc. And those are all things that you can control as well to a large extent. So when it comes to fear of tearing and fear of labor, I would probably, as much as possible, try to surround yourself with positive birth stories that went well. I would try to educate myself about what's the real risk of tearing, what does that actually look like in practice, how many women suffer from it, how large of a problem is it, how damaging is it really, and what could I do as an individual that would reduce my chances of tearing, so that I can have the best possible birth and labor and have the best experience that I can have. Essentially, whatever you can do to try to support your body and to try to help yourself out will make a big difference when it comes to being in this mindset of, oh my God, this is such a terrible, terrible, terrible period of my life, and I just want it to be over. Yes, I completely understand having that feeling, and when you are seriously sick, when you have something like hyperemesis gravidarum, I can totally understand why you feel that way. And maybe dwelling in that feeling just a little bit will make a difference and is worth, maybe just venting and getting this emotion out there is good and will help you feel a little bit supported. But it's also really valuable to remember and to learn that there are usually some small ways that you can support yourself and support your body, that this is not so bad. And so I say all of this for everyone out there who's really terrified of pregnancy, for everyone who's really terrified of the idea of giving birth, for everyone who thinks labor is, oh my God, the most painful thing that anyone could ever go through, and it's just so horrible, and all of this is a lot of suffering. For all of those people, I just want to put this out there. It does not have to be that way. And if you are one of those people who has a hard pregnancy or who has a hard labor, then reframing your mindset around it to at least try to make it as comfortable and as easy as possible for you in the ways that you can influence it will still make a big difference. some of the comments here. One person says, I am pregnant again after a miscarriage. I'm happy I'm pregnant, but then again, I am not. I'm so incredibly miserable too. I can barely leave my bed. I'm nauseous and constipated and depressed and can't sleep since I need to pee every 15 minutes. I'm not enjoying food at all and constantly hungry. I'm around 8 weeks. This first trimester is hell. I feel bad too for complaining, but this sucks. You're not a terrible person. You'll be a great mother. Hang in there. It's hard to believe those words, but I hear it gets better after the first trimester. And this really is the case for the vast majority of people. The first trimester is the hardest. I feel a little bit sad for her that she feels dismissed when other people say, hey, it's really worth it. I think people will often say that and fall back to that as a response, because once you have gone through pregnancy and you have a baby, and suddenly having a baby is a really, really amazing experience. And that's the part that sticks in your head. It's much more memorable than the whole pregnancy and labor part before that. So I suppose that's one of the reasons why you might feel a little bit not heard from this. Another comment that I'll read out here. I had a relatively easy pregnancy and I hated being pregnant, giving up my entire body, puking for 12 weeks, having to work on top of feeling like crap, the worries and anxiety, the last few weeks and wondering how labor would go, etc. Oh my Lord, it was the most difficult thing on my body, mind and soul. So many women say they'll miss being pregnant and I'm like, how? I'm 10 days postpartum and so relieved to be on the other side. Taking care of my baby is so much easier than being pregnant. I know it's such a long road, but you're on it and there's your beautiful baby at the end of it and you're definitely not alone. I find this a really funny statement when people say things like, I had a relatively easy pregnancy, but I hated it. And here I would say puking for 12 weeks is not a normal experience. Most people will maybe be sick a couple of times or will feel nauseous but not actually be sick. So that I wouldn't put that under relatively easy pregnancy, but okay, I'm glad she feels that on the whole it was relatively easy. And then the rest of it, I would actually argue, is also largely either situational or mindset based. So this idea of I'm giving up my entire body, I think that's something that you tell yourself, that you feel in your head. Having to work on top of feeling like crap, like that's a situational one that is also really sucks. And I completely understand why it sucks. But I would question if maybe the reason it sucks is knowing that you have to do it and being forced to do it and not being able to say, hey, you know what, I'm just going to be out sick for a week or 2 weeks and until I feel a little bit better and then it's going to be different. That's one aspect of it. The worries and anxiety, wondering how labor would go. This is just everything is all about how you talk to yourself and the type of mindset that you get yourself into. And honestly, you don't have to feel that way or act that way when it comes to being pregnant. So for all the people out there who are really scared that this is going to be you, I'm not saying that it's not going to be you. No one knows how pregnancy will go until you're through it. And even if you've been through pregnancy before, every pregnancy is different and people have wildly different experiences from one pregnancy to the next. But under all circumstances, the narrative that you tell yourself in your head has a huge influence when it comes to how you feel about pregnancy in general and how the experience is for you on the whole and how you remember it. That's one aspect to it. And number two, there are always things that you can do to support yourself. The question is that the real struggle is in finding out what those things are and really trying to go after them.